Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke.Academy. Today is Thursday, December 14th. Welcome to another episode of UnWoke.Academy. Today, I want to talk about politics. So, the two things that normally you don't bring up in the world of service and finance and all those sorts of things, and throughout all of my career, the thing you would never bring up, well, is two things: politics and religion. Well, I'm going to bring up politics, and there's a reason for that. One thing you may not know about me is I've actually gotten involved in politics. In spite of my better instincts, I'm going to make a really long, sort of an epic story short for the benefit of this conversation. So years ago, my wife ran for school board in a very left-leaning, sort of quote unquote progressive woke community. I guess that's sort of appropriate to the whole unwoke thing. We lived in this community. It was perfectly lovely community, very far left. And my wife ran for school board. That got me involved in and interested and aware of what's happening in K through 12 education. This was long before people were really aware of and focused on things like the woke that's now pervasive all throughout K through 12 education. And we didn't know anything at the time about critical race theory and its inclusion and stuff, and just all the terrible woke garbage that's in schools. But I started to become aware, and I was part of a group that went back into our school district. So we started to push back against our local school board. And that led to a whole series of conversations, a lot of denial on the part of our school board. In fact, I'm going to just interject one really absolutely kind of terrifyingly funny experience that I had in one of the school board meetings where we went in and started to push back against the school board. What's this, strange stuff that's being included all of a sudden? It doesn't seem very academic. And why aren't the schools and teachers focused on the rigors of academic discipline, et cetera, et cetera? Well, CRT came up, which stands for critical race theory. And if you haven't figured out by now, I am completely opposed to it. But it came up in the course of the meeting, and the superintendent made the comment that CRT doesn't actually exist. And it's sort of this rare theory that you might find on a college campus, but really that extremists were in, I'm paraphrasing the comments of this school board superintendent. But basically, the position was that folks were bringing the idea of critical race theory into school board meetings in order to disrupt those meetings, meaning us, of course. So, it was like mayhem in the audience. It was one of those school board meetings several years ago. Was that 3 years ago? I've lost track of dates. It was a while ago. So a big group of us are in there, and we're pushing back on all these things. And we have the school board superintendent, or the school superintendent rather, with the school board making the proclamation that, of course, CRT doesn't actually exist in the schools, but that it's just made up so that people like me could go in there and cause a disruption. And that's very frustrating and very dismissive. Well, a little bit of mayhem ensued, and lo and behold, this video is still out there on YouTube. You can go and find it. But about 6 minutes later in the video, after the school board, I keep saying school board, after the school superintendent with the school board and the school board meeting made those comments that CRT doesn't exist, one, I believe it was a senior from the high school, was given the opportunity to go up to the podium and speak, and had some prepared remarks, and walked up to the podium, and I'm not kidding you, thanked the school board for including CRT in the curriculum. Good heavens. And I wish that the resolution was better on the video that was shot from the far end of the room to be able to get the expression on the superintendent's face. He's I think he's political enough. He probably didn't register a facial expression, but my goodness, I mean, 6 minutes after he says it doesn't exist in the school and it's not being taught, a kid comes up to the podium and says, "Thank you for teaching it." So anyway, the point is that there's an expression that developed out of that experience, and ones like it. And we like to say, if you believe that the bad stuff isn't in your school district, maybe it isn't, maybe it is, but it's not so much a question of whether or not it's there now. It's a question of who will have the courage and wherewithal to push back and fight it when it does get there. Because we've seen over the last 4 years this push to the left, further and further and further to the left, with rampant anti-Semitism, anti-American sentiment, with the idea that boys and girls should be all mixed together in the same locker room and private spaces, and boys should be on girls' sports teams, and all of that stuff. It's just far left woke nonsense, and it's been spreading. As a matter of fact, just earlier today, I saw an article in there was a rural Midwestern, very red school district that was called out by Daily Wire, actually in my state of Ohio, because it was found out that part of the training instructed teachers to hide gender dysphoria from parents, and it was encouraging teachers to learn all sorts of new terms like pansexual and stuff. And so it took Daily Wire to uncover this wokeadoodle nonsense creeping into Ohio's schools. By the way, I can't help but interject because I'm very involved in this fight for K through 12 education on a volunteer basis, that uh, Ohio, while having once been a top 10 destination for education, has slipped to 38th out of 50. And some actually place it lower than that, depending on what you're looking at. For instance, mathematical skills, literacy, proficiency in the sciences, etc. So anyway, it's slipped down. But the whole thing, this whole experience, and getting involved in education and the fight for it, and pursuing academics in school, I ended up co-founding something called the Academic Accountability Project, or AAP for short. That's where we take state standardized testing reports and show on a proficiency scale what's been happening over time. And we've been mapping that for my state of Ohio. And I'm also encouraging some other states to do similar things, where I've got some friends that do some similar volunteer work. But this whole experience, it led me into politics in spite of myself. Here's why. I realized fairly early on that there's only so far that we can go in the fight for politics, in the fight for K through 12 education, before politics kind of rears its head. We need to rely on the political will of our state Board of Education, local school boards, local politicians. I'd like to think that when it comes to pushing back against this woke left agenda, that maybe the Republican Party would step up and start to push back and be the counterbalance, and try to to stem the tide, if you will. So that hasn't happened, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen enough, in spite of my years of giving money to the Republican Party and contributing to the GOP. I got to the point of frustration where I decided, if we're going to successfully fight back for education, childhood, and children in K through 12 in these government taxpayer funded schools, we need some political will. So I learned about something called the Central Committee. Central Committee is basically the apparatus that runs the GOP, or the Republican Party. By the way, the same holds true for the Democrat Party. It's structurally the same way. And there are big parts of this that most people don't even know about. There are local, what are called precincts, and there's local representation, or there should be, within the Republican Party. I ran for and became elected to a county central committee seat. So I am actually an elected representative, which I still have to sort of remind myself of, because that seems very counter to everything I thought that I was about. I still I refuse to think of myself as a politician. I'm an unpaid volunteer trying to fight within the Republican Party to reclaim education in the same way that I'm trying to fight for First Amendment rights and Second Amendment and elections infrastructure, the systems that we use, all this stuff. I just feel that ultimately my hope is that we're able to garner the wherewithal and the spine within the Republican Party, GOP nationally, to accomplish some things. So here's my reason for bringing all this stuff up. I bring it up because it occurs to me that there are some real parallels between what's happening in I've mentioned finance and its similarity to medicine. As we've seen over the past 4 years now, we've seen this medical tyranny that's top down, and it relies a lot on people who will just simply follow orders. So they're told, okay, you just run around and jab as many people as you can with these experimental shots. This mRNA, I almost said that backward, mRNA. And there are a lot of people in healthcare that really just broke all their normal practices and protocols and said, sure, okay, ran around injecting people with this stuff. Well, I think that's coming back to haunt some people. I think a lot of the people that allowed themselves to be caught up in that and to follow those orders are seeing the repercussions of that. And it's tremendously damaging to society. And I think a lot of trust has been lost in the medical practice as a whole. In similar fashion, and I've said this in a few different sessions before as I've spoken, in a similar fashion, the world of finance works the same way. And so when I see the lack of critical thinking, the lack of will within these otherwise fairly respected arenas. Let me back up. Maybe I shouldn't include politics in that. Heck, I don't even know if I should include finance in that. But the expectation, the hope should be that anybody who goes through medical school and becomes a doctor of something should have some degree of intelligence and competence and wherewithal to question bad orders. The same thing holds true in finance. And as I am now, for my first time ever, navigating this environment with other people involved in politics around me, I find myself looking around and wondering, where are all the people with competence and intelligence and wherewithal? And why does everyone seem to treat these environments like their job is simply just to follow orders and never question? It seems ludicrous to me. I've actually referenced it several times in things that I've written and some of the posts that I've made. There's a very well-known and thoroughly understood element of the Uniform Code of Military Justice that dictates that an order that is unlawful given to a soldier should be disobeyed. And so there are soldiers out there who, and I don't mean to disparage, I will not disparage any of our military. I think actually, to a great degree, that's where a lot of our intelligent people are to be found, in spite of whatever the common public perception may be that doctors are these bright, brilliant people. Oftentimes, common sense is lacking. So you may find, and I know I'm drawing some parallel analogies between multiple different disciplines in life, between medicine, legal, healthcare, financial, military, and politics. Really, it's anywhere and everywhere. This lack of compunction to apply critical thinking and wonder about the orders we're being given is very alarming. And the people within the Republican Party who are looking clearly at they have to be seeing the damage that's being done to our nation. If nothing else, just runaway inflation, rising crime, open borders, the overspending, and the rising debt. All these things that you can't not notice them. But the number of people in both parties, and surprisingly, the number of people in the Republican Party who will just sort of simply shrug and say, well, I'm just here following orders. Or more likely in the Republican Party, because it tends to be sort of this party-like mentality. Very few people want to roll up their sleeves and fight back against the woke left, which brings me to the experience and the point that I'm having in the world of finance. I've mentioned that I talk to a number of people. I'm making phone calls all the time, talking to friends and colleagues across the board in the world of finance. And there are a lot of people who tell me that they agree with my stance. They love the fact that I've created UnWoke. A lot of them are communicating with me and tell me stories and facts and circumstances. Some of it's just jaw-dropping, the stuff that they're experiencing and being told to do. But they're still, even in spite of that, very few who are willing to really risk it all to fight back for the betterment of society. So you may have people who can see, and I guess the extreme example is in healthcare. I believe that there are people now who are working within healthcare and can see the harm that is coming from those shots, but they're doing it anyway. And that, to me, is bewildering. I don't understand how some car payment or the desire to get along within the medical community or get that next promotion or something. I don't understand how that can supersede the desire to care for the human race. And I know it's less serious in the world of finance. It's not as immediately life-threatening, but the number of people within finance who are willing to go along with ESG and ultimately down this path towards CBDC. Again, that stands for environmental, social, and governance. And the second one, CBDC, stands for centralized banking digital currency, which is intended to be attached to a social credit system, which will be used to manipulate society and tell people what they can buy and when they can buy it and if they can buy it and how much money they're allowed to have, and control their bank account and control geographically based on GPS where people can buy. It's complete and utter nonsense, and it is global extreme communism on steroids. But there are people within finance who are willing to go down that path simply to follow orders. They're simply agreeing to go along to get along, and it's just the craziest thing to experience. It's like there's another extreme example that's also life and death. If a soldier, imagine, if you will, a U.S. soldier or a brigade or something is told that they need to go out and attack some city in America and go and kill American citizens. You would like to think we should assume that our soldiers would balk and say, no, based on the Uniform Code of Military Justice, I refuse that order. I have a lawful duty to refuse that order because that is an unlawful order. In similar fashion, if there aren't people in these industries like healthcare and finance, and for goodness sakes, the people who are elected to represent the US citizens and the part of the Republican Party, if they're not willing to put on their big kid pants and get out there and roll up the sleeves sometimes, get their head out of the country club mentality and recognize the fight that's before us and simply follow orders. I'm reminded of all those old grainy black and white videos that we saw of the Nuremberg trials. And there were big write-ups and everything. If you're not familiar, after the conclusion of World War II, when the Socialist Party was defeated in Germany, that's the Nazi actually stands for German Socialist Workers' Party. It's the Socialist National Party of Germany. A lot of people don't know that. The Nazis are socialists. But after the war, the Nazis were tried, they were caught and tried, and in the trial, many simply said, hey, I was just following orders. That was this answer that was pervasive all over the Nuremberg trials. I think that we have a lot of that same thing happening, unfortunately, here in the United States, and it's a shame. I hope that all these people, including my colleagues within the Republican Party, wake up and start to make some effort to do the right thing. I'm Jonathan Broadbent. This has been another episode of UnWoke.Academy. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for the next exciting episode.